Hey everyone, Mr. Happy here, and welcome to Mondays with Mr. Happy, aka Mr. Happy Mondays, a weekly Q&A show where you ask me questions and I answer them. Piece of me missing. I like to surprise all of you with that every once in a while. So, a couple things before we get into the Q&A. Number one, I'm looking at a tentative date for the Final Fantasy XI event I've been mentioning in some other videos. For those of you who have missed it, I plan on hosting sort of a Final Fantasy XI story carry-a-thon thing, where basically any 14 player who wants to try Final Fantasy XI and is willing to buy it and pay the subscription, or any 11 player that hasn't played any of the more recent stuff, can pop on into the game. We'll have some link shells set up. I'll probably make some gold world passes as well ahead of time, or as many as it'll let me make. I'm not sure. I might have to constantly refresh those just in case. And essentially the idea is I'm just going to be there to help people get through story stuff. I've completed every story that Final Fantasy XI has at this point, and I received a lot of help to get that done, especially towards the later parts where I was working on my more serious armor. You know, a lot of people made sure to help me. So now that I've finished it all and I don't really have the motivation to do any serious endgame in 11, not in its current form, I figured I'll pay it forward because there's a lot of people who want to try Final Fantasy XI and play it before Echoes of Vana'diel, or again, just people who haven't touched it in a really long time. And a lot of people just don't want to play alone. There's still going to be a lot of playing with the NPCs, even with everyone online. Truth be told, the trusts are way better than actual players when you're first starting out because they don't have to worry about armor, weapons, and you level so fast that, you know, they won't outscale it. You just have to constantly resummon them. So the idea is probably to encourage parties of 3 with a tank healer and support trust, or a tank healer and a DPS trust. That's probably going to be the best bet for most people as they're first getting started. But either way, the idea is with a link shell full of people working on stuff, I feel like it'll motivate people more to actually get through the story and to try to barrel through some of the tougher points of Final Fantasy XI. And by tougher, I mean more tedious than it would if people were just trying it on their own before, you know, Echoes of Vana'diel came out in 6 months. It's a really long time until then, but this is when I have the free time. December and March are the 2 times. Probably do it in kind of like 2 waves-ish. So that's what I'm looking at. There's also probably going to be a sale for Final Fantasy XI on December 11th. Normally they do it November 11th, and it's only $9.99, but they might hold that off till December 11th because they just seem to have delayed all their anniversary celebration stuff by like a month over the past couple of years. COVID stuff. Either way, that's what the tentative start date is. I'm going to nail down some details, and maybe I'll ask for an extra week and start it in like early December, but that's what the current plan is looking like. The other thing is, just as a reminder, I now simulcast on both Twitch and YouTube, 7 a.m. to 2 p.m. Pacific every day. I set up YouTube memberships. They're not really there for anything important. There's a few emotes. I got to actually upload a few more now that I'm thinking about it. But either way, you know, if you've never watched on Twitch and want to watch on YouTube, then those are the times to watch. Or if you're at work and your work blocks Twitch, which I know happens to a lot of people. I'm still working on a few other kinks with that. I have like a joined chat, like one that combines both, and YouTube messages are getting lost in there. So I have to like change my orientation for like the chats and the way I have them so I can actually keep track of all that, because that's been kind of annoying. Like I'll look over at YouTube and be like, wait, there's like 6 messages here that I just didn't see, and then I feel bad because I didn't acknowledge them. Either way, those are my announcements. Those are my little bits of news. Also, thank you to our sponsors over on Patreon for supporting. You don't have to support anything that you guys do for the channel here on YouTube. It's completely optional because I don't gate any of my content behind any paywalls. I'm hoping to keep it that way. I can't really imagine what I wouldn't gate behind behind paywalls, but it is what it is. I'm just saying that that's what I don't do. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, and so thank you to everyone who sponsors over there and who has a membership on YouTube or any of that other stuff. So with that, let's get into the Q&A because it's actually kind of late and I got a steak waiting for me. All right, my questions themselves might be a little off. For some reason, for the first time in like 3 years, this scene was just incorrect with its scaling. Maybe I changed the window size or something, but hopefully it doesn't cut anything off and I can still get all the questions in. Hashtag Mondays with Mr. Happy. Hey, Mr. Happy. Hi. Long-time lurker, first-time asker. Welcome. Got a couple of questions for this Monday. Do you think that Dynamis will play a role, small or large, in the Dawntrail storyline or even in the story for Echoes of Vana'diel? If yes, how so? I see. Here's the thing. A, that's too broad of a question. There's no way for me to say. You know, we literally know so little about anything, especially Echoes of Vana'diel. Number 2, it's always going to be present. So it's always a factor in any potential storyline because they can use it for quite literally anything. So that's like a not in good faith, like, yeah, it's kind of unavoidable, but it's also not really an answer because There's no way to base anything we know and say, oh yeah, well obviously for that part of the story they're going to use like there's no basis, there's no context. 2, what are your thoughts about exploration zone and Dawntrail being based around the concept of colonization, lair, and Wildkeeper Reeves? I don't want any. Well, I guess from Seekers. I'm always okay with more involved like zone control when it comes to exploration zones. For those who are unfamiliar, Wildkeeper Reeves are bosses. They're like major world bosses in 11. And then colonization and lair Reeves, essentially there's Reeves where there's essentially these are just micro objectives in the world. Some of them are like destroying a wasp's nest that is like spewing out, you know, bad enemies, or one of them could be like vines that are blocking the path. I think having some degree of difference with them, but at the end of the day, they all boil down to fates. So it's just a matter of what the purpose of them is. And I don't know. It's going to depend on how the zones are laid out. I'm kind of always okay with most things, but it has to do with the implementation, and the map layout is the most important thing if you're going to do stuff like that. Got a lot of just straight up comments so far this week. I wonder how many questions. I didn't scout the questions this time. I was just like, whatever, let's go. Hashtag Mondays with Mr. Happy. Hey there, Happy. Hello. With the addition of Criterion Savage weapons, I was thinking about the weapon design contest winners again. Have we heard anything about the second set of weapons being added? How likely it'd be they get added before Dawntrail? Take a guess at the final Manderville Relic set, but also leaves out the Blue Mage weapon. No, because aren't the next ones joke weapons? The Manderville's weapons have been serious this whole time. I sincerely doubt they're going to suddenly swap them over to being joke weapons. Yeah, because you're talking about like the fork and knife set for Sage, where they have all the cutlery for their weapons, like those types of weapons. Yeah, no, I don't know. I would have originally thought maybe the Fall Guys event was going to have those, but they didn't do that. So I think they're probably waiting for an opportunity to add weapons. See, those sound like Gold Saucer weapons to me. Like, even though not Fall Guys, those sound like Gold Saucer weapons. So maybe the Make It Rain event, they'll add like a bunch of stuff or something. I don't know. I think they just need to wait for an opportunity. Unless I'm thinking of a different design contest. I could have swore they showed 2 sets of winners for the same design contest. One of them was serious, one of them wasn't. In which case, yeah, I don't know. Gold Saucer would be my bet, but there's no indication of anything. Hashtag Mondays with Mr. Happy. Greetings, Master Happy. No, just Mr. Mr's fine. Theory question. I don't do well with theory questions. With the jobs being increased to level 100, do you first see existing jobs start to incorporate abilities based on Dynamis versus Ether, or existing abilities being changed to incorporate Dynamis as a source of power? I mean, all of our limit break is Dynamis. I don't see any reason why the individual abilities... So you have to remember that Dynamis is about a flare-up of emotion. So outside of buff windows, it doesn't really make sense, but our primary ability for Dynamis is our limit break. I don't see them kind of pulling away and making it just a way more normal thing, because it's not something we that consciously kind of dig into. Like we do when we limit break, but other than that, like, it's such an immense amount of power that I just can't imagine them incorporating into like a ton of individual aspects for the job. It kind of diminishes it a bit. Hashtag Mondays with Mr. Happy. Hello, Happy and Cats. Actually, Ivy was here, I think, at the start of the video. I think she was over here. With the most likely caster being green. You can't say that. Like, nature-based, sure, I sincerely doubt we get a mage called Green Mage. I'll put it out there. Even if it's based on Green Mage, I sincerely doubt they just call it Green Mage. I think it's going to be another name nobody can guess. How 14 fight design is debuffing not being a thing. How do you think they'll go about making the job fit the game without debuffing? They're making nature-based. I think no matter what, it's either artist or a nature-based mage. Like, those are the two kind of, like, I can literally, like, artist is just based on the names of the turtles, whereas the whole nature-based mage has kind of roots in seeing the little sproutling thing that happened in 6.5, plus the shirt being green, and that I feel like that's, for me, those for me are the safer bets. So if they were to do a green mage, I feel like it would be more nature-based than debuff-based. Why would the job be caster bard? I don't think it would be. If any job would have been caster bard, it would have been summoner. And I've been saying what was the job I was... I think I said it for Summoner like 8 years ago. No. It couldn't have been 8 years. That's way too long. When Bard got reworked in... Was it Stormblood where they changed it to the way it is now and then carried it into Shadowbringers? Yeah, it was, I think. Yeah, as soon as they started making the songs offensive, like they have been for the last couple of expansions, I said they would eventually do the same thing to Summoner, and I got kind of close with the Legos, but that's the only mage I can imagine being like Bard. And honestly, they shouldn't do that because it's way too rigid. Hashtag Mondays with Mr. Happy. Hi. Hope you're doing well. You too. Which expansion would you consider the best one overall for job design feel, regardless of balance? For me, it would be Stormblood. All the tanks felt very different. Same goes for healers. What are your thoughts? I think it's tough because it's either Stormblood or Shadowbringers. I think enough of Stormblood's good design was carried into Shadowbringers, but they had to fix up a few. Like, they had to fix Ninja in 5.1 finally for Shadowbringers to really kind of pull all the way into its fullest potential. It's tough. It is. I think it's close because I think, like, for example, Stormblood Monk is really good. I don't think Stormblood Machinist was very good. The White Mage still had a lot more issues in Stormblood, and they didn't really do that much to it in Shadowbringers, but it was marginally better. You know, Scholar's kind of a god in all of them. Astro, I think that's a matter of how you feel about the cards. So, like, that's perspective. I'm always, you know, the balance was OP anyway, so who cares about old cards because you really didn't have much of a choice. It was just making do with what you had bad, whereas Shadowbringers, a lot of people don't feel that. Like, it's divided. So I think it's one of the two. I think it just depends on how much you cared more about Stormblood's job direction than some of the job fixes that happen in Shadowbringers. That's tough. Honestly, I can't pick between the two. Hashtag Mr. Happy. I found all the questions, by the way. Hey, Happy. Hope all is well. Doing good. Leg day today, so I'm in pain, but I'm good. Do you know when they're supposed to add the other 4 servers? I thought it was supposed to have happened. I think I mentioned this in last week. Maybe it wasn't in last week's episode. Maybe I'm thinking of a different video that I did. I'm kind of asking for selfish reasons. Houses. Yeah, even said houses. Yeah, I thought it was supposed to have happened already. So I don't know. I'm sure the post says when they initially planned to do it, but I mean, I don't have that on hand, so I would go find that post. Hashtag Mr. Happy Mondays. Hey, Haps. Hello. I previously asked a question about relic weapons specific to Realm Reborn, but at the time you hadn't really done many of them, especially recently, so since you don't have much to say, which is fair. For now, you've begun the ludicrous journey that is the hunt for every combat relic. I'm curious to know if maybe when you get them all, you do one big wrap-up video with your thoughts. Yeah, I was thinking about that. I mean, there's always some sort of rhyme or reason to the reason I'm doing things in 14 itself. There's maybe a video lying at the end of most of those, and this is definitely another one of those cases where I think I can speak at least anecdotally about how I feel, because I'm sure I'm not doing them in like the hardcore ultra fast, like do it in like, because I know you can get I think you get a Zodiac weapon done in like 19 or 20 hours or something like that if you like really hard commit, but I think that's only if you've prepped certain things ahead of time or willing to drop gil on like the perfect items and whatnot. It's hard for me to remember, but I know you can get it done insanely quick. But yeah, no, there's almost always a video waiting at the end of most of the things I consider doing. Hashtag Mondays with Mr. Happier. Good afternoon / evening. What is your favorite YouTube show movie to watch to get a good laugh? I don't have a good answer to that. I don't watch new things very often because oftentimes my work is dominating my attention. So because of that, I don't like watching things that I haven't seen before very often because I get singularly focused on those things. So I tend to watch old shows, and the most of the times I only watch those when I'm actually going to bed. I'll put it on like an iPad. I'm one of those people that can't sleep when it's like ultra quiet. I need some sort of noise happening, whether it's in earbuds or on an iPad or whatever. And I'll usually throw on like Lucifer or The Blacklist, or maybe Criminal Minds used to be my like go to sleep show. I know probably not the best show to go to sleep to, but probably none of those shows are. But like I've seen it so many times that like I don't have to like stay up and watch an episode. You know, I know what happened. It's like I could still be entertaining, but it's just noise for me in the background. So I often don't do that. I'll often tune into like for example, over here on this other monitor, I have my boy Eric's. He does Pokemon stuff. He's been doing Kaizo Ironmon for the past several months. You know, he's done a bunch of shiny hunts. He's a good friend of mine from way back when, and I've got his stream up here. And I guess that kind of answers the questions. I don't really watch YouTubers so much as I kind of just hop around Twitch when I have like a spare moment, or maybe I'll call up a friend and have like a conversation. You know, there's a few different things I do, but there's no go-to, I guess is really the big thing. What are some simple meal prep ideas that you do that are quick and efficient? Honestly, I mass cook chicken breasts or mass cook like veggies and like ground turkey or ground beef or something like that. And then I usually in between those meals keep things around that would sate like a need, like maybe you keep like stuff around for a burger, or you keep a steak around, or something that's not so monotonous in terms of routine, you know, or maybe do some like stir fried like sweet and sour pork, like you just like, you know, cook it up in the pan and then serve it over rice with maybe some veggies or something like, and then you could meal prep that, but I just keep stuff like that around to eat on the regular. But yeah, I've got tons of meat in there, so I can really pick and choose. But most of the time, if I really just want to mass prep, Prague stew is another one. That's the beef stew, the exquisite beef stew from the Eorzean cookbook. That I love to make en masse for meal prep. It's got all the meat, it's got the carrots, and oh, it's so good. So yeah, those are just a few things. Hashtag Mondays with Mr. Happy. Well, hello there, Mr. Happy. Hello. And greeting of the cats are there. Aloha's over in the corner. Where did Ivy run? She's not in here. She must be in the tower. She was running around with Zoomies not too long ago. The question is about Square Enix putting references to other Final Fantasies into 14, like Whirl It. So 7, yeah. The 6.x MSQ, 7.x Alliance raid. Is there a reference to the 13 trilogy? There was a collaboration with the 13 trilogy. So funny bit of trivia actually about that. Lightning Returns and 2.0 were actually developed in tandem, so they actually borrow assets from each other. Lightning Returns, I believe, is the only game that, or maybe not the only game at this point, I'd have to double check, but they actually straight up took the Cyclops from Final Fantasy XIV, if I'm not mistaken, and Final Fantasy XIV took some of the things like the Dreadnought, the Anubis mobs. There's actually quite a few Lightning Returns mobs that show up, especially in A Realm Reborn. So, no, there's nothing specific to that outside of the collaboration, which they'll never run again. But there's just an interesting kind of mingled history between the two. Hashtag Mr. Happy Mondays. Well met, Mr. Happy. Hi. For cleaning stains in your kitchen sink, what product do you use for... Oh, I don't know. Honestly, I don't even look. As soon as I go to the grocery store, I say, okay, which of these is on sale, and I grab it. I genuinely don't even know what brand I have in the kitchen right now for cleaning out the sink. My sink is full of dishes right now, and I need to remedy that after this is done. But yeah, no, I don't have an answer to that. Hashtag Mondays with Mr. Happy. Hello, sir. Hi. First time question. Welcome. By the time you're reading this, it will be the future. Yeah. Wait. 60. Oh, you. Okay. This daylight. Yeah, no, I'm reading this like a week later, my man. Anyways, a fun question. Since Myth of the Realm included the return of some older musical motifs we haven't heard in a while, are there any motifs you might like to hear again? I can't wait for Diablos to somehow return again. Oh my God. Don't even disagree with you. Also, just for people talking about shapeshifting, I guess ancients could transform. No, there's like more for intact, but there's like very, very little in terms of more. Like whenever people transform in Final Fantasy games, more often than not, it's not a good thing. But there are a few cases like with Morpher and a few other characters that do, but it's just not a super normal thing. And as for motifs, I kind of put this in the same category as when it happens, it happens. I mean, it's the same with anytime people ask me about collaborations, which happens way too frequently, where I just go, oh, I don't really care. Like if they do one, I hope it's good, but I'm never actively asking for one. Same with the motif. And the motif, it's especially important because if I'm asking for a motif, it needs to be themed. It'd be like asking for, the Amarot theme to show up, or for that motif to be used again. But then it needs to be used with something dealing with the ancients. You don't want to just throw it into some like random battle theme or whatever. So I feel like by asking for the motif back, I'm asking for a character or content to come back. And then it kind of becomes the same thing about like what returning characters. Like the question like branches off into a lot of other tangents. So I don't really have an answer for that. Hashtag Mondays with Mr. Happy. Hey, Haps. Hi. Long time no ask. I have a few hellos just in case someone forgot. No one's forgotten this week. Thank goodness for that. My question is about crafted gear and augmented crafted gear. I currently have fully melded HQ ILL 640 for crafted tank gear and can be traded for the 650 with only 2 materia slots. So which is better? So this, I think, depends on the piece. Unfortunately, I can't definitively answer this. I very rarely do the 640 to 650 upgrade. Only because I usually just get tome gear like over weeks, and like the jobs that I needed that stuff for, that I needed gear for, I got it before 6.5. So yeah, I'm pretty sure that's a per piece basis, but the general rule of thumb is more health and more main stat is almost always going to be better than the substats that you are going to get, at least with left side stuff. With right side stuff, I think it gets a lot more finicky because you get less main stat and vitality. But if you're doing raids, I usually wouldn't skimp on item level just because the vitality is and how you play is always going to matter more than those substats. Besides, BIS is really where the substats matter most. I'm not going to say they don't matter before that, but when it comes to like comparing yourself against the performance of a lot of other people and just looking at the gear difference between you two, it's really at that point where having the exact right things and making sure you're not missing even 0.5% of damage and output, that's where it really matters most. So I would personally upgrade it regardless, but that's just me. Hashtag Mondays with Mr. Happy. Hashtag Mr. Happy Mondays. Hello again. Hi. How are you? Good. Glad you're better. What if I wasn't? But I am, so thank you. The question is about gear degradation and Spiritbond. I'm leveling crafters, so it's my downtime between content updates. All I have to do is get new gear for Weaver. I was grinding out the same mat recipe for the other crafts, and it dawned on me that both degradation and Spiritbond not only change independently of each other, but also differently for each piece of gear. Why is that? Are different gear pieces weighted differently for gains and degrading than others? Okay, so it's been a long time since I've done Spiritbond. So if I recall, degradation is now based on strictly the completion of an activity. So if you defeat enemies or you go from in combat to out of combat, if you are killed, all of those things affect your degradation once a boss, especially in particular a boss, is defeated. For crafts and gathers, it's just based on like a per craft or gathered piece. If I recall, Spiritbond is based on the amount of experience you would receive from said activity relative to, well, I mean, no, just how much EXP said activity would be go. I think there's a limit to that, but I know if you can't get experience from something, you can't get Spiritbond. So I'm almost certain that that's the difference between the two. I get why you would assume they would be together, but if I'm remembering correctly, and I am just trying to remember, so I'm not saying what I'm saying is correct. I'm just reaching into the recesses trying to pull something out. Those would be how they're weighted. Hashtag Mondays with Mr. Happy. Hey Haps, hi. I brought an extra basket of greetings. Yeah, after last week, you're gonna need it. There's even an aloha in there somewhere. No, aloha's on my couch. You don't have them in a basket. I'm with you on Beastmaster, and as an old 11er, do you think we might see a revival of Pancration? Please, God, no. Please, please. It's literally just get a Slimer and Elemental and then just go home. That was literally the whole thing. Please, it's just no. It's just no. No, I don't think so. No, I don't want it. I don't want anything of that caliber in 14 again. After Lords of Verminion, I don't want Blitzball. I don't want anything that's like its own separate game in the Gold Saucer. Nobody does Chocobo Racing anymore. Nobody does Lords of Verminion. They're dead. Nobody cares. I don't want anything else like it. Leave it alone. Hashtag Mondays with Mr. Happy. Hello there, Happy. Hi. I realize you are likely to get a lot of questions with Echoes of Vana'diel. Absolutely. So if there's a video you can point me to, then great. I guess what I would consider an old head 11 when I played around the middle of Xylart and stopped roughly halfway through Treasures. Been waffling on giving it, well, I think the start of my video might have just answered this question. It's very different now, wanted to better understand the situation. Are required gear pieces still astronomically expensive? No. So pretty much to finish all of Rhapsodies of Vana'diel, you can pay basically nothing. Like you could fast track it with a bit of gil, but it's not even that much gil. The big thing is that you can pretty much guarantee 2 million gil weekly without doing anything at all. And you can farm a lot of activities just for like bits and pieces of gil. Like you could go solo salvage, you could go farm dynamis. Some of the more recent activities have pretty good gil dumps in there. So it's pretty easy to get gil now. And on top of that, you don't really need a lot of it unless you're going for like modern end game gear. Ambuscade and a few other things. Basically, there's a guide that's called 1 to 119. It is a reference. It is a resource I'll be referencing a lot when I go to start my event. It tells you how to get through everything, basically for nothing. It's just a matter of running around and getting everything done. The worst cost is probably spells if you want to play a caster more than anything else. But no, there's no slog at all. The biggest slog is the game itself. At this point, the amount of running around, getting lost and having to tab out to wiki guides over and over, like that's exhausting. But the actual like gil cost, no, you can get by with like relatively low cost unless you're super impatient, and even then you probably wouldn't spend much. Hashtag Mondays with Mr. Happy. Hey yo, Happy. Hi. And a handful of hellos to anyone missing theirs. Nobody yet. Doing good. I know this was answered already if you plan on making a video on this topic, but what would your 12 boss wish list be for the 11 Alliance raid? Don't really have 12. There's only 3 that are on my, not even wish list, but almost on my, like, I'm predicting they'll be there. Shadow Lord is a must. He's literally the game's original final boss. He's one of the most iconic enemies in the game. Promethea is another really important one. Again, on one of the other most iconic bosses. Not to mention, we're going into Dawntrail, and Promethea is the Twilight God. So the opposites kind of situation. And then my final prediction is actually that Altana is going to be a boss. Now, of course, I don't expect Altana to be the actual Altana. Again, you got to remember, I think of 11 fit into 14, not 11 existing within 14. Like them like retrofitting the story and the worlds and the aspects of it to make sense in 14's world, and not, hey, 11 and 14 coexist. I sincerely doubt they do that. So Altana being the Dawn Goddess in Dawntrail, to me, makes a lot of sense. But there's so many other bosses, and honestly, a lot of them are like mixed levels of iconic. So you could argue for so many of them that I honestly don't even, the other 9 bosses or whatever. Hashtag Mondays with Mr. Happy. Hi. Speaking of the Astrologian rework, with the knowledge that top can be cleared without a healer, how much of that influenced the rework? Literally nothing. It will have no bearing on it whatsoever. They don't care about that. They don't care about what one group was able to achieve with lots and lots of specifics. If it was the masses could do it, then they might care. But then that would really be more of a rework of how the healer role is approached, and not the Astro rework in particular. You would see sweeping changes to everything. So, no, that's not going to have any impact. Hashtag Mondays with Mr. Happy. Hey, hi. You going to get into Like a Dragon Infinite Wealth that comes out in January? Probably not, because it comes out around like 4 other things. Not to mention 7 Rebirth is just about 3 or 4 weeks after that. I think those games are really good. Just to be clear, I don't play them, but I've watched people play through them, and I'm really impressed, especially with I started seeing people go through the turn-based ones. I think that was, I forget which Like a Dragon I think that might have just been Like a Dragon. Yakuza Like a Dragon. I don't remember. But, so that one, obviously Infinite Wealth probably to be turn-based as well. I'd assume. I haven't kept up with it at all. But I just, no, with the timing, like there's P3, there's Like a Dragon, like I said, 7 Rebirths at the end. I forgot there's something else in there. There's Tekken. There's one other thing. P3, Like a Dragon, Tekken, 7 Rebirth at the end of February, so like a month later. I feel like I'm missing something. Like there's something at the end of January that I'm forgetting. I'll at least leave it to a maybe, because honestly, playing through Persona, I don't know, dude. I think I've kind of like Persona'd out, and it's not even just because of the games. Like the big thing is committing the amount of hours those games take. But it's not even just that, dude. Every time I play Persona games, I just get fucking creeps in the chat. Like I can't stand people who are just ultra creepy about these fucking teenage characters. Like, and it happens every time. Like I just don't even want to be a place where that can exist or is present. It's just, yeah. So maybe this is the chance to jump into this one instead, with all the other games coming out at that time. Hashtag Mondays with Mr. Happy. This is one giant ball of text. Hey, Happy. Hi. Was just wondering, why did they make certain content optional? Let me read the rest. For example, optional trials like Warring Triad, 4 Lords, and the weapons, almost all the 24 and 8 mans. As a Sprout, I thought it was so nice. Devs give you a lot of freedom to do what you want. Now I played through the game through 2 X packs. I start to think that why they spend that much dev time on content for a lot of new people who don't know how or where to unlock it. Remember, well, that's what the blue exclamation marks are for. Most people see exclamation marks and need to get rid of them. A blue exclamation mark, even more so, because you've been conditioned at that point to accept the quest, because it's where you unlock new features. But they make it optional because if it wasn't optional, they'd be adding hundreds more hours onto the mandatory content that people have to do. That's already a big, big problem with the amount of hours you have to spend to get caught up to current. Imagine if you also threw all that stuff on there. It'd be ridiculous. So it just doesn't make sense to do. Hashtag Mondays with Mr. Happy. Hello, Happy. Hi. First time asking. Welcome. I would like to know just what is midcore content. Whenever I've seen comments about it, they never seem to agree on what makes content midcore. I think that's a common disposition, is that midcore is really more of a perception of what content is designed for. Midcore is, in my opinion, more of a state of how you approach the game and less about an overall. You can be a midcore player, for example, someone who doesn't play like a ton of hours or a ton of days of the week, but you still tackle some of the hardest content in the game. You know, you're budgeting time and what makes sense with the rest of your life. You're not even casual. Like casual could be like, you know, again, even a casual player could actually do hardcore content. It's really about the amount of hours and the amount of effort being put forth, and which one of the two you value more. You could be someone who plays 8 hours a week and do Savage, you know, and that would be considered a casual player, but you do the hardest content. So, you know, was there, you know, where does it really lie? I think if you're speaking strictly on difficulty, At this point, you're looking at extreme trials, criterion normal, and probably the first 3 fights in a savage tier. I think you could argue maybe all 4 fights in a savage tier are really mid-core, but the essential idea is that with any sort of basic effort or any amount of gearing, you could probably equal, or you could either be equal to or overcome said challenge within reason. Whereas something like an ultimate, or even just maybe soloing Palace of the Dead to 200 or Heaven, the activities like that might be considered more on the hardcore scale, because they require a whole commitment to these things and a full understanding of them piece by piece by piece. You don't need that to get through Savage. You don't need that to get through Extreme Trials. So I think when people discuss that, it really comes down to how they perceive. If they see Savage raids as this insurmountable mountain, it becomes hardcore content to them. It's not midcore anymore. Whereas when you ask me, someone who's been doing Savage for all these years, I look at it as a challenge that people psych themselves out of if they're saying it's too hard for them. No, it's probably not. You're just psyching yourself out of it because you don't have the confidence to do it. So it is a matter of perception, which is why you don't usually get like a solid answer. But that's my perception on it. All right, and then there's one other thing that's here. It's way too much text, so I'm not going to put it on the screen. There was something about answering last week where somebody asked me about the relic armors. I actually have to reread my answer to that, but there's a whole huge back and forth discussion about my answer in regards to whether or not it would be BIS. So I'm going to read it, but I'm not going to put it on screen because, again, it's just too much text between all the replies. I have to make a slight point here. Someone asked about the relic armor, and the reply was that it wouldn't be best for any serious raider. That wasn't even all that I said. I said it wouldn't be best for anybody. Maybe the point is it would be best for people who do not raid. I understand that you're a raider, but sometimes you should consider that there are people who don't. So the problem with that is that it's not really that good for anybody, because the alternatives are either so close and are just as obtainable and usually obtainable earlier that they don't serve much of a purpose. Now, I will wager, or at least wager, that's not the right word. I will posit that at least an Onimo set was briefly best in slot for the unending coil of Bahamut. So there are these like other like weird bits, but the big thing is that with the idea of relic armor, you have to consider how it plays into the entire structure of the entire expansion in terms of assets that will be required to use it, how much people will desire it, because you have to remember, we've especially seen this lately. If you make something that people do not desire, they won't do it. Like, some people will. You're definitely going to get some people that will. But if you okay, I guess let's go like another step further with it. If you made Manderville relic armor, people would be furious, because it's just tomes and tomes and tomes and more tomes and tomes on top of that and tomes on top of this and these tomes and that tomes, and then they become poetics and they mash with all the other relic stuff that you could get from the previous expansions. It's a lot of work. It is not a small amount of work for the artists that have to do it. It needs to be tied into the overall item level structure of the game, unless they plan on making it specific to the content, in which case that's perfectly fine. They did that with Blade's armor and it wasn't that popular, but hey, there's always that. And it's just a lot of work for essentially just more, the sake of more grinding, because they can just make more sets of armor, and that's really all that's happening. It's just redistributing where any sort of armor asset for any given patch would be placed. So you're just adding a grind to one of those sets, which now posits the problem of taking it away from the people who don't want to grind for an armor set, because you're very likely reallocating those assets unless you've hired enough artists and enough designers and 3D modelers to handle the extra load, which with that volume of stuff, if you saw anything relic armor, you'd probably see roll armors. Like, that's at least a little more feasible, you know, like the way, like, I guess, yeah, the blade stuff and the Hydatos and Pyro stuff, you know, it's all role specific. You know, there's caster, healer, but not like, you know, relic for black mage, for red mage, for summoner, for like one for every job. That's definitely never going to happen. So there's all sorts of arguments that can be made for and against it. But at the end of the day, in terms of my specific response, it serves very little purpose from a rating perspective. And when something doesn't serve purpose for a rating perspective, that already eliminates a large number of people from actually going for it. I'm someone who would, because I just complete stuff. And that's it. Maybe that's all they need. Maybe they just need more objectives for people to complete. But if they can't even get the weapon right. I don't want them to do armor. With the way the Mandible weapon went this expansion, if they can't get that right, I don't want them to do armor. So that's just where I'm at on that one. But yeah, that's the final question for this week's episode of Mondays with Mr. Happy. Thank you for tuning in. If you have a question, be sure to throw it in the comment section of the video below. Be sure to like, favorite. Sorry, I'm salivating at the mouth for the steak that I'm waiting to get. Be sure to like, favorite, subscribe, and share. Ask your questions for next week in the comment section of the video below. And keep an eye out for some fun videos. I got a Super Mario RPG, just kind of like, just talking about why I love that game so much, because it's one of my favorite games of all time, with the remake coming out this week. I've got a Final Fantasy 11 video coming out this week, and I think I've got one other video. So I've got 3 videos minimum planned and recorded, and I got to see about what else I'm going to release this week. I got a few ideas, so don't worry. I got stuff on the docket, maybe some 11 stuff and whatnot. Anyway, that's going to be a wrap. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one. Until then, take care.